Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be reading from Classic Fairy Tales, retold and illustrated by Michael Foreman. And today's story is going to be Beauty and the Beast. And I'm going to read it in two parts because it's very long. Okay, here we go. Rushing outside into the garden, she found him laying by her favorite rose bush. Once upon a time, there was a rich merchant who had 3 sons and 3 daughters, and he gave them the best that money could buy. All the girls were pretty, and the youngest was the prettiest of all. When she was a baby, her family gave her the nickname Little Beauty. As she grew older, this was shortened to Beauty. Beauty was not only the prettiest of the 3 sisters, she was also kind and thoughtful. The older sisters liked to mingle with the rich and famous, dancing at the grandest balls, sitting in the most expensive seats at the theater, and strolling with the high and mighty in the park. Beauty preferred to stay at home with a good book. Rich businessmen were always proposing marriage to the sisters, but the 2 older ones said they would only marry a prince or a duke. Beauty always thanked everyone politely for their proposals, but she said she was too young and wished to stay with her father a little while longer. Then, on one dreadful day, the merchant's business collapsed and he lost everything. No money was left. All he had now was a small house far away in the countryside. He tearfully told his family that there was nothing else to do but go and dig the land and grow their own food. The 2 elder sisters announced they would not leave the big city, but would accept one of their marriage proposals. But now the sisters were no longer rich. None of their former suitors would even look at them. All the folk in the city who had been upset by their older sister's snooty ways said, "Let them go and be high and mighty among the sheep and pigs." But there was sympathy for kind, gentle Beauty. All the rich men who had asked her to marry them proposed again. But she told them she could not possibly leave her father in his misfortune. She must work beside him in the countryside and comfort him in his sadness. When they arrived at their new home, the merchant and his sons set to work on the land, and Beauty cooked and baked and cleaned and did all she could to help. At first, she was exhausted by all this work, but gradually she grew stronger, and the fresh country air made her feel healthier than ever before. She still missed the nice things that money had bought her, but she told herself, "Crying won't do any good. I shall try to be happy without a penny." Her 2 sisters were quite the opposite. They crawled out of bed at noon and spent their days moaning about the loss of their fancy city life and grand friends. They didn't lift a finger to help Beauty, but teased her instead for becoming such a housemaid. The family lived in this way for almost a year, and then the merchant received news that a ship carrying valuable goods of his that he had believed lost in a storm had finally arrived safe in port. The good news immediately prompted the eldest girls to demand presents and ask their father to bring back new dresses and hats and all sorts of jewelry. "You haven't asked me to bring you anything, Beauty," said her father. Now Beauty thought her father couldn't possibly sell all his cargo for enough money to buy even half the presents her sisters wanted. So she said, "Just bring yourself back home, safe and sound. And if you should see a rose, bring me a rose to remind me of the summer." So the merchant set off. But when he came to the port, he found that his precious cargo had already been distributed amongst his creditors to pay off his debts. After a great deal of argument, he had to start the long journey home, just as poor as when he set out. When he was about an hour away from home, he was caught in a fierce snowstorm. Twice he was blown from his horse as night closed in and wolves began howling all around. Both horse and rider became hopelessly lost in a great wood. The merchant began to lose hope of ever seeing his family again, and then he saw a light. As he went towards it, he saw it shone from the windows of a magnificent palace. To his surprise, he found the palace gates open and the courtyard empty. His weary horse saw the stable door stood ajar, and going inside began to munch the oats and hay, which looked as though they had been specially provided for him. After seeing his horse was fed and comfortable with a lush bed of straw, the merchant entered the palace. The massive door swung open at a touch to reveal the great hall. A roaring fire and a long table bearing a feast of delicious things to eat. There was one place setting and one chair, but still no one to be seen. The merchant stood dripping wet and steaming before the fire. "Surely the master of such a splendid place will forgive me for seeking warmth and shelter from the storm." He waited and waited, warming his front and his rear, but still no one, not even a servant, appeared. The clock struck 11, and the merchant edged closer to the table, the smell of food making his empty stomach groan. He picked up a roast leg of chicken and looked around, hoping to see someone so that he might say please, but still there was no one. The chicken leg tasted so good that he couldn't resist eating the whole bird and washed it down with a glass of wine. Still, no sign of anyone. Even if the master is away, there must be servants somewhere, he thought, and wandered from the great hall into the adjoining rooms. "Hello," he called. "Anyone home?" All of the magnificent rooms with a bed were deserted. At the top of a wide staircase, he came to a room with a bed, the covers turned back, and with large inviting pillows. He heard the clock strike midnight, and exhausted, he lay down to sleep. When he woke next morning, he was amazed to find a new set of clothes laid out for him. "Oh, thank you, whoever you are," cried the merchant. From the window he saw no sign of snow, only parkland full of flowers. When he had dressed in his smart new outfit, he went down to the great hall, expecting to meet his generous host at last. Still, there was no one to be seen. But on a table near the fire was a pot of hot chocolate and fresh pastries. "Surely this palace must belong to a kind fairy who has taken pity on me," he thought. "Thank you, kind fairy," he said out loud. "Thank you for everything." He finished off his breakfast and went to the stable for his horse. He passed by a rose tree and remembered his promise to Beauty. He reached up and picked a small bunch of flowers. Immediately there was a terrible roaring, and suddenly before him appeared a beast so terrifying that the merchant fell to his knees in fright. "Is this how you repay my kindness?" boomed the beast. "I saved your life, gave you the freedom of my home, and now you repay me by stealing what I love most in the world, my roses?" Ungrateful wretch, you shall die." The merchant threw himself flat on the ground before the beast. "Forgive me, my lord. Forgive me. I picked them for one of my daughters who desired a rose above any other gift." "Don't call me lord," growled the beast. "I am a beast, and flattery will get you nowhere. You say you have a daughter who loves roses? I would like to spare your life, but only on one condition: that this daughter comes here to die in your place." "No, not my daughter," exclaimed the merchant. "Don't argue with me," said the beast. "Go before I change my mind. If your daughter refuses to die for you, swear you will return here in 3 months' time." The merchant had no intention of allowing his beautiful daughter to fall into the clutches of such a frightening creature, but he promised to return. At least he would have some time to hold his family in his arms once more. Then the beast's angry expression softened. "I won't allow a guest of mine to leave empty-handed," he said. "Next to the bed where you slept, you will find an empty chest. Fill it with whatever pleases you, and it will be delivered to your home." Then the beast departed, and the merchant returned to the bedroom, telling himself that although he was to die, at least his beloved children would not starve. He found the empty chest, and beside it was a great heap of golden coins. The golden coins filled the chest to the brim exactly. He let his horse find its own way home. Through his tears, he saw his sons and daughters running to greet him. The beast had allowed him to keep Beauty's roses, and when he gave them to her and spoke of the terrible price he would have to pay, the elder sisters cried floods of tears and said it was all Beauty's fault. "Why couldn't she have asked for pretty dresses like we did? Oh no, she had to be different. And now she's got Daddy into this awful trouble, and she's not even sorry." "Crying won't help," said Beauty. "And if the beast will take me instead of father, I shall willingly go." "Never!" cried her 3 brothers. "We will find this creature and kill him." "I doubt that is possible," said their father. "The beast is not only big and terrifying, but I'm sure he has special powers." "Beauty, I will never allow you to sacrifice yourself for me. I am old and have lived my life. My only regret will be leaving you, my dears." "I won't let you go by yourself," said Beauty, "and you can't stop me following you." Well, I'm going to end it right there. Until next time for part 2, we'll see what happens, whether the father lets Beauty go with him to the palace. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. I love you, I miss you, and keep reading.